Chapter 1. Orchid Blood. Blood dripped down her dainty blue-hued fingertips. Each drop stained her white and gold-laced dress. Each step she took poked, prodded, and mudded her bare feet as she stumbled through the city. Crowds upon crowds of beggars, destitute and the hungry, lined up, surrounded her and studied her every step as if they were waiting for her downfall. Only a handful of guards remained at her side as they fought back against the onlookers. They inched ever closer to the midwives that stood at the edge of the long-forgotten shack at the end of the city. This was her only option. Her name was Mariah Presswich, the daughter of the high nobles who ran Latimer, the city of gold, and her child was conceived out of wedlock. It was her own very husband who beat her to a pulp, a man she was forced to marry by prior arrangements. The father of the child she carried, the man she loved her whole life, was sought out, hunted, and executed right in front of her. Now, to teach her one last lesson, her father sent her to the outskirts of Latimer to give birth and discard the child. Do this, and your husband will forgive you and your transgressions. We raised a noble daughter, not a wench. He cursed her, and as he cast her out of the castle. When she finally reached the doors of the shack, she almost broke down in tears. For who could kill their only child? They dreamed of them, held them, loved them before they even breathed. The midwives comforted her and did their best to support her, encouraging to fight on with every last breath she had left. She poured every last ounce of mana, her spirit, attempting to fuse it and give life to her child, where her will was fleeting fast and rapidly. In one quick breath of agony, she prayed to who they believed to be the god of luck, Loki, that her baby would survive, and even more so, that they would both live to see each other smile once more. And thus, in a single breath, the wish she had cried out was granted. A baby boy, his name, Tanbo, a parting gift from his mother. It would be the one and only time that she got the blessing of holding her child in her arms. 5 minutes. For 5 minutes they cried together, cherishing this moment onward for an eternity. The life she wanted to escape from had now ripped her away from her fantasized future. For now they both had to pay the price. The beggars who lined the streets were given the gift of her son, and she was returned swiftly to the castle, where she was treated for her injuries. And as the years passed, the boy grew comfortable in his small shack in the outskirts of the slums of Latimer, an orphanage filled with 5 kids, led by a 62-year-old guard veteran and his wife. Halls filled with sounds of laughter, clanging metal, and the songs that filled the boys' heads, songs of freedom, prosperity, and promise. "Can you sing it again? One more time, Mr. Gamloke," asked Ronnie, as he pulled on the edges of his tucked blanket, nearly yanking it off. His eyes sparkled with joy, with a hint of tiredness hiding away. "Maybe another night, child," uttered the caretaker, as he came over to retuck the sheets and fix Ronnie's pillow. "You need to get some sleep, child. Grow up strong. Besides, I wouldn't want to wake Tanbo now." Ronnie looked over at the young child lashed on his side, smiling gently as he watched him yawn and roll over, kicking him slightly. Okay. Promise you will tomorrow?" "I promise, little Ronnie. No, get some sleep." Mr. Gamloke slowly got up from his rocking chair, grabbed his walking stick, and fixed their messy blanket. He patted them both on the head, smiled, and left the room. Soon, everyone in the house was sound asleep. Everyone except for Ronnie. Still full of energy, Ronnie shot up from the bed and shook Tanbo awake. "Come on, bro, wake up," Ronnie exclaimed, quietly as he could. Tanbo slowly got out of bed and rubbed his eyes awake. His eyes adjusted and scanned his surroundings. Everyone else is asleep? Tanbo asked Ronnie as he sluggishly put on his shoes and tossed on his jacket. Yep, we just need to wake up Nyft and go. Shh, do you want to wake up everyone? Tanbo rhetorically asked as he shook him back. Ronnie playfully pushed Tanbo off of him and rushed to gather his things excitedly, while Tanbo looked down and around the dark halls to ensure the way was clear. As Ronnie began to run up the stairs, he ran directly into Nyft as she stood staring at the two of them from the top of the stairs. Her eyes hinted with amusement and curiosity. You two are lucky Granddad is starting to lose a bit of his hearing. I could probably hear you from a mile away, she smirkingly said as she scuffled down the stairs. Well, you do have big ears, even for an elf, Ronnie mumbled as he shook his head. Just can't shut your mouth, can you? Huh, Nyft rebutted as she stormed down the stairs, and just when she was about to tussle with Ronnie, Tanbo ran up and covered both of their mouths, shutting them up as they squirmed in his hands. He pulled them close and smiled. Both of you are loud mouths. We have to hurry and go right now and see this thing before everyone else wakes up. He then let go and pushed the door open. Come on, slowpokes. There is no way we're about to just wait around now. I mean, come on. There's a whole magic rock. He froze. A shiver shot down his spine like a lightning bolt. His ears perked up. His golden hazel eyes darted around, looking through the dark halls of the house. What's wrong, Tom? And just then, there was a mildly loud creak coming from inside the building. All three of them now had halted their breaths, standing completely still, waiting and anticipating the strike of another sound. And with what sounded like a click, they panicked internally and quietly sped as quickly as they could out the door without making so much as a peep. A moment later, before they knew it, they were already 3 blocks away from their own home, in the middle of the night, catching their breaths and heaving. Thwack! Nyft slapped Tanbo in the back. One of these days, you're gonna kill me with a heart attack. She smirked and lifted her exhausted position as her eyes wandered over her surroundings. So, is it now or never then? Now or never. I promised an adventure and I plan on keeping it. Ronnie smiled as he strutted down the city streets, the two of them following suit. Through the fields and onto the grasslands, the three of them continued trudging along until they reached a small dark cave. Ronnie rested out his hand, palm up, and smiled. Ladies first, he chuckled. Nyft rolled her eyes, felt the stone on her fingertips, sparking a tiny mage light, and carefully treading into the dark cave with her brothers beside her. Ronnie then passed her up as he tried to lead the way to the treasure he found. They went up and down and in circles as Tanbo pulled him back away from the dark objects and stalagmites he wasn't paying much attention to. As they continued to navigate the area, Tanbo eventually tried to explore the cave and led his siblings in hand. He attempted to look up and down the cave and decipher his brother's vague rambling-like instructions to where to find this box of sorts he described a few days ago. All he knew was that it was black and white and glowed colors of all sorts, sometimes. Whatever that was supposed to mean, he thought, as he realized nothing his brother said lent him any assistance in navigating the cave. He quickly glanced over at Nyft, as if to say, "Are you getting this?" She shook her head, and they continued aimlessly. As they did, an echoed laugh burst through the dark corridors of the cave, reverberations sounding like a melancholy music as it played again and again in their heads. As their attention darted around, they froze up as Tanbo shakingly pointed towards his left, where a man had slowly come out into sight. A dry, toneless chuckle was let out as he sat down on a small rock, cane pointing out and a knife brandished on his lap. Ronnie stepped forward and pushed the others behind him. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice shaking, and his fists balled up, sweaty and ready to launch. The stranger simply shook his head and fished in his bag. He pulled out a strange box, glowing red, blue, and purple, fixed in white, black, and gray colors. "You're quite foolish," he sighed, "leaving such a powerful object in a silly little cave, like we wouldn't notice. You're quite the lucky fella, aren't you?" He played with it methodically, checking its weight and dimensions, and sizing it up, his eyes filled with unmistakable look of hunger. It's mine! Give it back!" Ronnie blurted as he took a shaky step forward, almost falling over. "Yours!" The stranger scoffed as he let out another dry chuckle, as if coughing up ashen coal. "First of all, it's not yours, it's his. Besides," he got up slowly from his seat and stretched his legs, "the Thieves Guild believes in finders keepers. I mean, you didn't go looking for the cube's owner when you got it, did ya?" "Nope, didn't think so," he jabbed. He slowly walked in a circle around them, drawing the dirt and rocks beneath him with his cane, his footsteps completely soundless. "I'll let you have it, though, under one condition, that you answer a question of mine, of course," he said sneeringly. What is it?" Nyft jolted up, shaking anxiously with an excited look in her eye. "What, my friends, is the necessary condition for progress?" "I think," Ronnie blurted. Up. "No, not what you think. I said what is." He straightened his jacket and sat back down, playing with the cube in his hand. All three children stood there and looked at him in confusion, with not a clue in their minds as to what the answer could be. At that moment, a woman with violet hair walked into the cave from the direction the man had. She slapped his head, snatched the cube from his hands, and tossed it to Nyft. "Don't be stupid, Alba. We don't have time to play stupid games. We completed the contract already, and besides, they're just children." She sighed and looked back at the three of them with a brief, somber expression before she turned away. "Go home, if you know what's good for you," she said as her voice echoed, slowly fading out as they faded from view into the dark depths of the cave. The three children stood there in confusion, cube now in hand as it glistened in colors past tense. They huddled around it as their fingerprints mixed with its black-luster exterior, peering past its glassy light into oblivion. A taste of life in the wrong order. The boy who held wicks of flame beheld the willow tree locked in cases, squared faces armored with steel trappings, an engraving of death, locked through hands of blood, twirling vines revealing art. A tapestry of long names forgotten by the ravages of war, a single sigil, twin blades faded in proper order, entwined in snow and thunder, a bellowing roar. The sun eclipsed them, blue-blooded and sharp-faced hands touching the willow tree, an offering of something more from one soul to the next. Luck-touched eyes saw life brought anew, reversed and rewinded. The white snow thawed, revealing brunette grasses, smooth exteriors, and bright faces, familiar yet so foreign, sharp ears and sharper smiles among the streets of a golden city. Then a choice was to be made, conflicts and wonder, through the great exodus that led every street empty. Amongst the strong and the smart, two souls touched. Two sets of names became three. A new child to carry an old name, a heritage to carry, soon to be tainted by death, loss, and the abyss. Painted to be black, to be forgotten, Nyft. She saw it. Large forests covered in the shining white fluffy snow. large cathedrals, harmonizing music, and the flickers of flame. The cube rested softly in her hands as she stood on the mountaintop city. The hum glow of the shimmering cube resonated with her very being. A large human men and women, dressed in black and with white designs of feathers, pushed through the crowds as they surrounded a child holding a silver amulet, words illegible, and 3 rings within. They sang the songs of Kriu, the god of creation, as they pushed the baby down into the forest and below the mountain. His screams echoed with Nyft's heart as it broke. She tried to scream, but nothing came out. She tried to move, but her body was defying her. The cube didn't seem so warm now. Instead, it felt numb. Not calmingly, but frighteningly numb. The songs faded away, the candle lights faded, and the buildings broke apart. The people vanished. All that remained was Nyft amongst a white, barren land, devoid of snow, devoid of land. A black horizon barred in the distance. Suddenly, there too danced a little girl with black, large eyes and pale skin, smiling and dancing to a song one Nyft couldn't quite hear with her ears. And there it stood. For a moment, their eyes locked before the figure opened his mouth to speak. Nyft was jolted awake. "Hey!" Tanbo yelled desperately. He shook his sister and shoved her around, his face a look of craze and awe at the things he saw. Ronnie stood gazing out at the slight peak of the light shining through the cave. What was that? Light. Wait, Ronnie gasped suddenly, interrupting Tanbo. Light? Ronnie ran as Tanbo and Nyft desperately rushed behind him, with a panic look on their faces, with no time to explain. The sun burned brightly in the sky. But how? In less than 1 hour, time elapsed from nightfall to golden morning rays. In a daze, the children ran through the fields, their eyes locked onto the spot of town where their home was. The crowds filled the streets, the smell of stew and pastries, the priests spreading the word of their patron gods. They pushed through all of them, barreling their way home, in hopes that their grandfather hadn't noticed. But when they had got there, the house was still. Ronnie caught his breath and smiled. The sun shone on the windows, a shadow cast on their home, cooling the sweat off their brow. But when Ronnie pushed open the doors, Tanbo kneeled, sick to his stomach. He grabbed at anything nearby as he held every instinct in his body to puke. He looked at the stairs going to his adoptive grandfather's room. Black soot, the smell of iron, and a guttural feeling so powerful. It was as if he was punched in the gut with a heavy blow. I'm home, Grandpa? His eyes lit up, the sun casting a full shadow throughout the house. His siblings cover him as they check up on his every inch. But he held on to them and climbed up the stairs desperately as he continued to rush and shake his head. The 3 of them continued to walk up the stairs. They noticed complete silence apart from their footsteps. No scolding from the Gramps, no morning stories told to the infants from Grams, no smell of tea or baked bread. Step, no shock, no annoying chores for makeup, no loud crying. Step, the music of the wind blowing, the sight of his worried siblings, the feeling of cold hard steel, the taste of iron, the smell of orchids? No. He opened the door. His eyes widened as the veil of the blowing curtain set down. And for the first time, the silence was broken by an ear-piercing scream. For it wasn't orchids, but roses. Liquid roses spread along the cracking floor. He froze, and so did Ronnie. Nyft bolted. She stared at her grandfather's blank eyes, wide and relaxed, nothing. Her grandmother was gone too. Gone in a second. Miss Ronnie sputtered, but Nyft shot back at him with a hurt look that broke him. He took another step. He kneeled and shook her. "Grandma, wake up." He continued to yell, shooting star after shooting star passed through the horizons of his cheeks, failing to answer any wish. Tanbo still stood there in a daze, his golden hazel eyes staring into the wall as he refused to look down. But he still noticed the trashed cribs sitting by the window still, broken glass reflecting off the sunlight, illuminating the room. It wasn't long before the silence was halted once more by the sounds of clanking metals and gruff voices. And no matter how hard they fought, the guards had taken a hold of their deceased guardians' bodies in a swift motion. A time for goodbyes was a blessing not many in Latimer were afforded, not even for heroes, perhaps especially not heroes. Formerly, Brigadier General Tyson Gamlog, honored with saving countless lives when no one else could, was thrown into one of Latimer's many mass graves, with his wife in hand for the last time, burned and forgotten by the city, with nobody but his children's tears to douse the flames. And so there they sat, on the edge of oblivion, or what they thought it to be, a childish adventure turned nightmare. The cold steel of the gauntlet pressed on Tanbo's shoulders as he wept for time memorial. "It's time to go," the man said, a soldier of Latimer, his helm covering his face and expression. His voice mirrored the cold air and armor. As I'm sure you are already aware, we don't let urchins roam the streets. And with no spaces left at any other orphanages, the man cleared his throat, and huffed for a second before continuing as if trying to remember his line. "The military graciously accepts you into their ranks to be taken care of." He nods assuredly and yanks on Tanbo's arm, pulling him away from the mass grave. The boy resisted, but it was of no use. He hadn't eaten in days, and his legs had fallen asleep by the time he had arisen. So there he was, dragged across the bleak town, scraping against the floors alone, for his siblings were already consumed by the city's cruelty. It was only then, that he had felt the same feeling again, his stomach turning at the smell of ashes and rich iron. And as he turned his head up high to the foggy city skyline, his blood ran cold. He saw a faceless man covered in a foggy white shawl, stained with red. Feet dangling off the building's edge as his head faced Tanbo. His attention was eerie and fixed and unwavering as the wind that blew through its cloak. His face was like Vanta black, a complete void eating at Tanbo from a distance, leaving him frozen in complete fear as the figure eventually faded into the city mist. Chapter 1, End.